Do you remember climbing trees as a little kid? Personally, that was one of my favorite things to do. And it was never enough to be in the tree. Instead, you had to go up to the very top and out onto the furthest branches. It's no wonder my parents really didn't like it when I would climb trees. And as a parent myself now, I can relate. In fact, my personal rule for my kids is they may not climb on a tree branch that's thinner than their thigh. We want our kids to be safe. And interestingly enough, though, God, the perfect Father, that's not really his priority. Instead of asking us to live safe and comfortable lives, God calls us out onto dangerous and daring adventures so that we actually grow in our faith and our trust of him. Today, we're going to be exploring the story of Jesus calling Peter out of the boat to come walk on water with him, and that's found in Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. So let's get out of this tree and go explore that passage together. Welcome to the third and final devotional in a series I'm calling Lessons from the Boat. Today we are going to look at the story where Jesus calls Peter out of the boat to walk on water with him. And this story takes place right after the feeding of the 5,000. In Matthew, we read, "Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up onto the mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid.' 'Lord, if it's you,' Peter replied, 'tell me to come to you on the water.' 'Come,' he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. Cried out, 'Lord, save me!' Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. 'You of little faith,' he said, 'why did you doubt?' When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly, you are the Son of God.'" This story has always amazed me, and it's been a lot of fun to me, and I can't help but relate and also laugh at Peter. What was he thinking? Asking, "Is it you? If so, call me out of the boat." And yet, there we see the first thing that I believe we should emulate. Peter wanted to verify what he heard Jesus saying. He wanted to double check and make sure he understood it. And as we seek to know God and to hear his voice and to listen to his direction for our life, we need to be willing to say, "God, is this really what you're saying?" And God's not offended when we do that. All throughout the Bible, we see examples of God repeating himself and again to clarify what he has said to his people. We see that when he verifies his covenant with Abraham again and again throughout the years of Abraham's life. We see that in the story of Samuel when God calls him, and at first he thinks it's Eli the priest calling him. And we see that even later in Peter's own life when God starts directing his church to reach out to the Gentiles, and Peter has the vision of unclean animals on a sheet. He doesn't get it at first, and God gives that vision 3 times. So here what Peter does is fantastic. He says, "Jesus, if it's you," and he asked Jesus to make it clear what he was wanting Peter to do. And then amazingly, Peter was willing to get out of the boat. And just like Peter was willing to follow Jesus, you and I need to be willing to follow Jesus in normal life as well as when he calls us to do different and extraordinary things, because that's part of the beauty of walking with God as we expect him to be a part of our life, to lead, to guide, to direct. And if we're going to have that dynamic relationship, when he has made his will clear, we need to follow. And then finally, while Peter has done a great job getting out of the boat, he realizes once he's done it that it's a little bit scary. You know, the waves are big, the wind is fierce. And in life, as we follow God, we're going to find that there are lots of waves, there's lots of winds, things won't go easily. And Peter's mistake was that he let his attention be drawn away from Jesus and fixated instead on what was wrong. And so, in our own life, as we follow Jesus, we need to keep our eyes just locked on him. In life, you go where you look. That's true especially when you're driving a car. One of the first lessons is keep your eye on the road. If you start looking at the field, before you know it, you're going to be drifting off the road. And it's true even in our spiritual journey that we will go where we look, where we focus our time and attention. You know, and if our thoughts and emotions are controlled by fear and all the things going wrong, we're going to start sinking just like Peter. Yet what he did so right is that when he started to sink, he didn't just go down. Instead, he called out to Jesus and Jesus rescued him. So keep your attention focused on Jesus. Hopefully you won't sink, but if you do start to, return your focus to Jesus. So where are you at in your walk with God? What is he calling you to? And how are you responding? Are you getting out of the boat? Are you learning to walk on water? Or maybe you're sinking a bit. If so, call out to him. Remember, he's right there. And as we follow his leading, remember to keep focused on him. God isn't interested in calling us to safe, comfortable lives. Rather, he leads us on daring and dangerous adventures so that we learn to trust him. May you go in the grace and peace of our Lord.